Yeah. It's so good. Thank you, Neil, for the music.
Yeah. Neil's my landlord. I don't know if I told you that. He lives right upstairs and he has a cool dog named Harold, a very friendly pit bull. But I'll tell you, the first time I met him, I reached out my hand and he snapped at me. And it's been a uphill road ever since. But now he's like my best friend. It's amazing. How
And
are you, Matt?
and Neil's into percussion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. I'm really happy to be here with you in the Cross-Eyed Crucible.
Yes.
So you are Kevin Martin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm Matt Faulkner.
Sometimes.
Yeah. I'm working at it.
And you are calling from or dialing in from or channeling from
Detroit, Michigan, just north of Detroit. And you're calling in from
Oakland, California, where we're experiencing 70-degree weather in January. How about that? Yeah. Talk about climate change.
Yeah, I know. And you had like the 105 degrees this past autumn, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. We can't go in there. We'll go down that road another time.
Absolutely.
Climate change. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing here. We're going to talk about Cross-Eyed Crucible, who we are, why we're doing this. So the first thing we thought we would do is to lay it out there for everybody. Okay, why we call this thing the Cross-Eyed Crucible. Yeah. I'll go first. All right, Kevin. What that means to me. First of all,
go ahead.
Yeah. The Cross-Eyed Crucible to me is the experience I have when I am working. Sometimes it can be individual, like when I'm really into my work and I really feel like I'm like stuff's coming through me, like I'm being channeled or channeling through me. And I've heard that, I remember Michael Jordan said that he would get into the zone, that was 20, 30 years ago. And different people who meditate, call it a different thing. I'm an artist. And when I talk to my students, it feels like honey to me. Mm-hmm. I'm not like big into eating honey, but just the whole idea of like, the whole rest of the world evaporates. I don't, it's not that I don't care. It's just that I'm so here. And it has really great product. Once I've been in that space, afterward, it resonates out from that space. And the same thing though can happen with other people. The talk that we're going to have today is in the Cross-Eyed Crucible. We're going to, and so I know we've talked about this before, you and I, it also feels to me like, well, first and foremost, the good things, when I'm with people who are in a positive attitude, are open, willing to be authentic, share what's sensitive to them, and to be supportive, people who are funny, people who are witty, people who are compassionate. I want to be in that space. And when I get in a space with people like that, I feel it has a product.
A product.
Yeah, to use a business word, and when
a product.
It does. They're spiritual mathematics. Yeah, it does. It's a sequence. It's an equation. Solid people, positive attitude, openness, and talking about things that are important to us. And so that's the last thing I'll say is the world has issues just like me. And I want to get with people who want to be real about that stuff and deal with it and be present with it. Yeah, be present with it. The important thing. And then lastly, there is the thing, since we're talking about stories, that there is a feeling that there is lots of subtle depth to the world that I can't appreciate. I for some reason, my receiver is cloudy. And when I get with other people who also recognize that these old stories have answers, like a map to the soul of myself and the world, then we can actually help each other clear up a receiver. You're going to perceive things that I don't. And so that's what's important to me, and why. And then lastly, I'll share too, I was born cross-eyed, and there I'll talk a little bit more about that, what that meant, as a kid, and what I learned about it from another culture. Again,
Mm,
with
mhm,
somebody else in a spiritual way,
mhm,
about what cross-eyed means in another culture. All right,
mhm.
I'm done. That's my story.
Yeah, I can't believe it that you were born cross-eyed. I was definitely a cross-eyed baby, and still have elements of being um, um, cockeyed. So I went from cross to cock. It's just like a threshold. I don't think my parents ever meant for me to be cockeyed, but they were fixing the cross, and then I became cocked. So I want to thank my parents
So
for
when you say
trying to get that
cockeyed, you mean
fixed.
like wall-eyed, like one eye goes over?
I don't know
Okay.
the specifics of it. If you can ask one of my aunts, they'll explain it to you. They'll say, look at him right now, and you'll see that the eye is turning,
One eye
outward.
drifts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one eye drifts.
Yeah.
So it's a drifting eye. So for me, the cross-eyed crucible is definitely about personal origin stories. What stories are we telling about ourselves, and what parts of our stories uh, do we not have control over? And so I didn't have control over the cross-eyed story. I was born into it. I inherited the cross-eyed story, and so it's been a part of my initiation, right, into the living being world. And it's like, okay, well, how am I navigating that? So in a sense, it's very personal. And then we talk about the cultural aspect of having a visible disability, right? That is a disability that people can see right away. And then also too, it's a disability that that hinders my own perception of the world, right? And in the Judeo-Christian uh, tradition, this is like a mark of punishment, from
Right.
turning inward onto oneself and not having one's eyes on God. And I was just like, whoa, what kind of inherited baggage was I born into, to be cursed this way? And so the cross-eyed crucible is about me coming into a spiritual center, a longhouse, and working through my shit,
Right. Right.
right? And me being able to metabolize what it is to be cross-eyed so that other people don't have to do it for me.
Okay. So did you get that, in the opposite of the blessing eye is the cursing eye?
Right.
Did you get that cursing? And it could be it's unintentional, but did somebody say to you, "Oh, that means that because you're cross-eyed, that you don't have access to God," or whatever, what you said earlier? Did somebody actually say that when you were a kid?
No, no one actually said that, but anytime anyone puts pity on you, right,
Right.
is projecting pity, otherness, right? It kind of pulls you away from your own divinity.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, while no one explicitly told me that I wasn't welcome, when you're treated differently, that's a good enough indication.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because actually, in my experience with being cross-eyed, I was a baby when they two, maybe three, when they
Yeah.
brought me to the hospital and messed with the muscles and so to speak fixed it. I don't really go cross-eyed now. I don't get much drifting. I haven't played around with it either because I never wanted to be like, oops, broke it. But when my mother was pregnant, she actually happened to see, she was getting out of a car with some aunties, maybe a grandmother, and she saw a guy who was disfigured. And my grandparents or my grandmother and my aunties, whatever, whoever they were, said, "Oh my God, that's a mark on your baby because you've seen this guy and he was so transfigured. He's maybe been in a fire or something." And that was, maybe that's why I'm cross-eyed. I never thought of that connection before, but I did remember those two. Of course, I was cross-eyed, but also that my mother told me, yeah, that she saw this guy who was disfigured, and the elders said, well, that means he's going to be have issues some way or another, so um
Well, can I just say something to
yeah.
you, Matt? So I think well, can I be a I'm gonna go ahead and admire you for a second. So which is interesting that you were born cross-eyed and now that you have glasses on, so the audience can't see your eyes, but you have some pretty remarkable eyes.
Oh,
You know, it's like one of your standout features.
oh, thank you.
Yeah. So it's interesting how that transmuted into something, you know, handsome and beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, see, that's the thing too about the cross-eyed crucible to me, as well as that, look, there's a lot of different ways to look at what is one group or one system may see as a deficit. So I want to bring in that thing too about the spiritual thing. I was hanging around with some sick people. Now it's the word
Mm-hmm.
SIKH,
Mm-hmm.
sick community in America. And I brought up to he was a seer, you know, he was a prognosticator. He read people's stars, and but through the Sikh tradition. And he, you know, and it, also they say Sikh to help Americans actually pronounce the word, but if you speak to people from that community, it's Sikh. Um, but he told me that in the Sikh community, actually, people who are cross-eyed are seen to be are marked as gifted. They're a gift to the community because the brain is situated so that it can still perceive the other world, whatever you want to call it, the afterlife,
Mm-hmm.
heaven, nirvana, the other side, and can live in this world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now that requires, you know, you can see why it might be, well, cross-eyed, huh? You know, the brain is set up so that it can hold that kind of what feels like a contradiction, being able to perceive and hold both the other side and this at the same time. So when I heard that, I was like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
how come nobody ever told me this, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
then he also said that they have, you know, they had another belief about people who are wall-eyed, that they're able to, one eye sees the path clearly
Mm-hmm.
and the other eye can scope. And so one eye is always on, you know, so you can imagine that in that community, a person who's wall-eyed is somebody who you want to pay attention to what they're saying because they know the way forward. They're a
Right.
pathfinder,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what happened to my community that
Right.
it was all about cursing and, you know,
Right.
not like, hey, this is a gift, you know, to see it that way. So um, again, that's about the cross-eyed crucible to me too. The crucible is the holy grail to me.
Right. So Matt, in terms of your trajectory, you know, being born cross-eyed, and then having that fixed, then growing into, you know, going through your different rituals or initiations, right, as you became a man. Can you tell us and can you tell me a little bit about who you are and who have you grown to be?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I grew up left-handed and formerly cross-eyed in a time, you know, oops, right? Um, in a time where in New England, beautiful town just outside of Boston. Uh, Always was excited when I was a kid that Paul Revere rode right
Mm,
uh, through my town. You know, that was part of my cross-eyed crucible. You know, that's my story. I love that about, you know, that's where these people did this thing. Those are my ancestors, you know.
mhm, mhm,
Um, and so grew up there. It was, I didn't get a lot of support. Nobody really got in my way, except for there was a lot of bullying at that time. Bullying wasn't a thing, you know, like we didn't say, okay, bullying doesn't work. There wasn't programs to talk about bullying. And when I mean bullying, I mean people who get beat up. I mean, really
mhm,
beat up.
mhm,
And so being an artist and um, I didn't want to play football or as we say in New England, hockey. Um, I wanted to play soccer. So these were all things that I was told that I was, you know, I was a little bit, maybe that's effeminate, you know, maybe he's gay as a detriment, you know, and so that was a thing, and luckily I had enough support in my home and in myself, knowing that this thing that I could do, which was draw, I was an artist, that was not going to go away. I could try to ignore it, but it would make me go crazy. And so I'm going to go to art school. And so I did. I went to the school called the Rhode Island School of Design. And learned how to be an artist. And that's where I got with my tribe. I'll never forget the first couple of months of being with people who knew my language without me trying to help
Mhm,
them
mhm,
understand my language.
mhm, mhm,
Didn't there, everybody, gender, race, I was connecting with all of these people, and we knew we had come to, you know, Rivendell or Nirvana or whatever you want to call it. It was the, and it wasn't perfect, and there were difficulties, and it was expensive, and all of those things. So that's what shot me off into this career that I have, where I went to New York. I started working in advertising, started to lose my mind because I'm not an advertising person, and got connected with some editors at publishing houses. They allowed me to illustrate some books. They hired me to do that. They asked me if I had some ideas. I wrote some books and illustrated them. And so in that interim, which has been now, it's going to be 40 years. Oh, well, no, it's 37 years or something like that. I've been writing and illustrating books and graphic novels for kids. And so that's who I am. And in that, my feeling for story is right up there, whether it's
mhm,
verbal,
mhm,
written, or visual storytelling. That's my language,
mhm,
primarily visual storytelling. I don't know how to put it any better. I do know that, and I'll finish by saying, I remember at school when I was a kid, everybody had to learn number and letter systems. And I was like, why isn't anybody teaching visual communication systems? You know what I'm saying? And that's still an issue. For kids in schools. The kids whose aspect of their brain is open to visually communicating, and that's something that's really important to me, is that we're just completely ignoring that. You better be good at math and science and language, or you fail. You know, and that was hard. To be in that. And you could say, well, so what? Get out the violins. But that was just something I carried as a kid. And going into college, that was one of the experiences too, is that so many of us had this, like, you fail, when we
mhm,
had these gifts.
mhm, mhm.
It's like we were carrying these big gifts on our back, and to give them, nobody wanted them, until we got to this place. So that's kind of my history in brief.
Oh, sweet. The only two things I caught in all of that is that you were formerly cross-eyed, and thankfully you weren't gay. So those, which leads me is that, I'm still cockeyed, and, fortunately for me, I am gay. So, so this, so that's how I'm weaving the two together.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I completely hear you. I heard you, Matt, loud and clear. I can go ahead and share a little bit about
Yeah,
myself.
yeah, go.
Yeah, so I grew up with these, I guess, cultural, familial, mythical stories about how we got here to the Bay Area in California, San Francisco Bay Area. I know some places have a problem with us calling ourselves the Bay Area because there are many Bay Areas throughout the United States. And I have a very interesting history in that my family actually came from the north, came from Mount Shasta, um, from a little town called Weed. And we've been here for about 5 generations now. So, our lineage goes back to the early 1900s of being here in California, which is pretty different from a lot of African American families that came during World War II and later, right? So we were earlier inhabitants, and then we started in the far north of the state, and I grew up here in the Bay Area, um, and I was a very disinterested child. I grew up in a very codependent household where I took on a lot of adult responsibilities. Fairly young in my life, and a big part of me maturing into adulthood was one, figuring out that I couldn't live life that way, being a good boy and being a good person and doing only what the adults wanted me to do, but I actually had to build some self-awareness and find my own path. And somewhere in graduate school, and this is where I met Leslie Rapp, who is the wife of Walton Stanley, how I got connected to the conference in which I met you at the Minnesota Men's Conference. So I'll just um, say thank you, Walton, for making that connection for me. Um, uh, I went to graduate school and I learned that, I had very low self-awareness. And at that moment in time, I decided to become a Buddhist to learn more about who I was, my own desires, and my own conditions around suffering. And so I've been in that journey for about 10 years. And what I do for a living is that I um, am, and let's see, we got a telephone ringing here. It's a busy house. And what I do for a living is that I am an internal facing specialist. I manage the community development of my organization. And I do that as a story holder. So I am holding the story of the organization and making sure that everybody is on that page. Okay.
They got the call.
Yeah, they got it.
Okay.
It's so annoying because it's a landline that
Yeah.
we don't use.
So what is internal facing? Can you tell me that before you go on?
Yeah, absolutely. So internal facing is just I am a specialist that turns inwardly. That means that I'm cultivating the spirit of the organization internally so that we can do the external work. And the work that we're doing is that we are advocating for reforms in the criminal justice system, in that we're actually healing ex-offenders when they come out of their incarceration journey, and ensuring that each member has enough dignity and self-respect so that they can integrate into society at an equal level. And so in order for us to do that work, we have to cultivate some of that inner drive within ourselves, and that soul searching within ourselves, and we have to do the work within ourselves. And so I'm tasked with the development of that. And a lot of that is just telling stories of what stories are we telling ourselves about who we are. And so, and then also too, in what stories are we telling about our organization? Because organizations have their own myths. And I'll just give a shout out to Ruth Morgan, who is the founder of Community Works, which I work for. And the mythical story about her is that, she started this organization single-handedly in her basement/garage. And now we're an organization of more than 60 people.
Wow.
But we're like, how did she do that? I mean, because she's so phenomenal, a phenomenal artist, just a phenomenal woman. And now she's at the place where she's leaving the helm of executive director, and she's allowing new blood to come in and steward the organization. But it's like, how do we keep her story alive of humble beginnings?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Awesome. So, getting up on about 23 minutes here. We're going to go a few more minutes. Thank you for sharing that. Also want to talk a little bit about, before we close, how did we get here? You started to talk about that, so I just want to talk about you as my friend. So yeah, Kevin and I met last February at a men's conference, and I just resonated with you. I mean, I just like, there's a guy I want to meet. Okay, went over there and we talked, and in talking to you, and we've done a lot of talking over the past year, there's a thing called the pandemic. It's been difficult. There's a thing called the Black Lives Matter. All of the issues that have come about, we've touched on them, we've addressed them, and we've talked about story and the great myths. And hearing the stuff about what you've done too, what you do as work, to me, that's like, it's so, I don't know, it's so powerful. And I admire that, you thought I had nice eyes. Thank you very much. I think you have a nice heart. I think you have a good heart, and a strong heart that you're doing this stuff. So that's why, when Kevin and you and I have been talking about story and seeing how it actually helps us, like I said before, a soul map, right? Our soul and the soul of the world. These ancient stories seem to have been like that. That we said,
Mhm.
man, we could share this. Maybe this would help, you know? And so that's why I wanted to be here with you and do this thing that we've called Cross-Eyed Crucible, which, by the way, Kevin's also a poet because he's the one who came up with the name, the Cross-Eyed Crucible. Uh, so that's why I'm here. I want to talk about this with you.
Mhm.
I don't have any intentions about necessarily fixing anybody else or the world. That would be crazy. I've tried that, doesn't work.
Fix my eyes, fix my eyes.
Yeah, right. But maybe the stories and the conversations that we have might be something that others want to get involved in. So to me too, it's like, if you're listening to this, I would say you're probably resonating already with what we say. We want you in here. We want you to make your observations too about the stories that we share, and the issues that we share that come up because of those stories. So that's my story about why I'm here, how I got here.
Yeah, and I'll just go ahead and just add to that. I'm in here because I need to work through my own shit, first and foremost. And I think an element of generosity, which comes out of my tradition of Theravadan Buddhism, actually Mahayana Buddhism, actually, is that we practice this principle of generosity. Not only do we share resources, but we practice being authentically ourselves. And we do that to the degree that it becomes safe for other people to be their authentic selves. And then also too, we have this sacred practice that we do together. I mean, Matt and I, we belong to a deeper men's group that also belongs to a wider men's group. So we are supported by so many men, throughout the United States and throughout the world who are a part of this network. And so the goal here for me is not to prophesize what it is exactly that we do, but that we publicly put it out there so that other men and non-men and everyone in between can
And man,
tune in, listen in, and maybe receive something here.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah. So before we close, then we got a couple more minutes. What does what do these stories mean? Why would we, how is
Oh,
it,
well,
what's up?
I just wanted to say something else. It just reminded me of something else. So, you talked about the genius of me coming up with the title. I think your skill as as an artist and being able to do that animation. Um, I think uh, I think it's a profound gift and a tool, particularly in these conversations as we will be journeying to mythical worlds and mythical lands. You have a remarkable skill in which you can bring those images out of that, out of that ether and make them real. Like you did our title page. And so with that, it's an immense skill, and I'm just happy to have you on my side of of the road. Um, yeah.
Yeah, ditto. Um, this question, well, thank you for that too. But I'm thinking now, what does story mean? Why are we actually going to talk about stories? Because it could be one of the things is too, in terms of, you said the word myth. I'll preface this by saying maybe we should save talking about stories for the next segment, but leave it with the last thing I'm going to say about it then is myth has been turned into the definition in current, language is a lie. Oh, that's just a myth. That's fake news, right? When in fact, myth formerly meant the underlying structure of, I would say, consciousness. Um, and it's an expression of community. It could start with an individual, but stories don't stick around just because they're just sticking around. It's because people find value in them, and they still find value in them. And the last thing I'll say is, there's a quote from Robert Johnson, the Jungian, where he was talking to children. He asked a class of children, "What is a myth?" And one child said, little boy raised his hand and he said, a myth is a story that's true on the inside, but not true on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, they're from the mouths of babes. Kids get myth. It's the same thing. Like when I go to schools, I say, who likes to draw in here? Like 9 out of 10 kids raise their hand. They get visual metaphor. That is the language, I believe, of, we'll call them the ancestors. It is the beneficent spirit that is the underlying motor of the world. And the stories give us a hint about that beneficial, compassionate, loving intention of that spirit. So I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but I did. You want to say some stuff about it a little bit?
No, not really. I can pick this up for the next leg of our journey.
All right. Do we want to go out with music, Kevin?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, let me get that on. So again, this is music that was put together by Neil Tooch.
Yep.
Kevin's landlord.
Yep. And my buddy, he's right upstairs. He makes the refrigerator.